This is an RNZ podcast.
I'm trying to count the number of ethnicities and nationalities I can see here at this big potpourri underway at Auckland's Mangere Refugee Resettlement Centre. The backs of each row of chairs are labelled in languages: Pashto, Amharic, French, Arabic, Bangla. Looks like this is going to be one complex task for the interpreters here, who are all pretty poised for it. And there's lots of kids, all mostly dressed in their traditional outfits, running around eyeing the food that's about to be served shortly. I've been invited to this potpourri for the latest intake of refugees being formally welcomed into New Zealand, where a new chapter is about to begin for them. It's a massive welcome for a lot of people.
Yeah, we had a special day today. We had the potpourri for the new intake that has just arrived last week from different parts of the world. So that's the traditional way of welcoming our new residents to Aotearoa, New Zealand, and that's what we had there. And we had some lovely speeches from people from Pakistan, from Afghanistan, and from the Democratic Republic of Congo.
This is Here Now, and I'm your producer and host, Kadambri Raghukumar. This month, I'll be meeting refugees from all walks of life in New Zealand, featuring their stories on the podcast in the run-up to World Refugee Day later in June. In this episode, we're looking at the process of resettlement and the factors that shape the experience for our newest arrivals who come here via the UNHCR, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. I'm with Jamal Murati, who you just heard there. He's the head of refugee quota programs here at the centre. So how big was this last intake?
All intakes are on average are about 215 people.
But there's a much larger number than that present at the resettlement centre right now, making it a hugely busy time for the programme. Each year, New Zealand accepts 1,500 refugees, so that's mostly about 7 intakes. At the centre here, new arrivals are oriented to the country, and kids and adults spend their days mostly learning English and generally all about life in New Zealand.
They stay here for 5 weeks and then we bring the next intake. Sometimes there is overlap because everybody who comes through the program, we find houses and place them in a community. Sometimes with housing shortages across the country, it's a bit challenging to find houses on the day people finish the program, so some will stay over. And also we operate in a very, very complex global environment. People come from different parts of the world, so flights are cancelled. Exit permits sometimes is difficult to be obtained because of, different countries operate differently, airline shortages and everything else. So
there is a housing shortage, and we've also come face to face right now with a cost of living crisis. So how does that affect your resettlement process of refugees from here into wider community in New Zealand?
I mean, housing shortage is an issue. It's a challenge for us. But it's not only for our program here. It's for the whole nation. It is a challenge for us that we are facing. We have people who, when they finish the program, they have to stay behind until we manage to find houses. So it's not as much as the rent and the cost of living. It is actually finding physical houses.
This is the border between Sudan and South Sudan, where tens of thousands of people fleeing violence in Sudan have crossed into South Sudan in the last 2 weeks.
The Biden administration is considering a plan to allow some Palestinian refugees to come here to the United States.
Hundreds of refugees arrive every day at this transit camp run by the government and the UN.
As crises around the world continue to rage in Sudan, Gaza, Ukraine, Democratic Republic of Congo and beyond, the world's seeing some of the largest numbers of both refugees and internally displaced people facing some catastrophic conditions. So how does Immigration New Zealand then determine the makeup of their intakes, and what factors determine where our refugees come from?
There are more than 35 million refugees and more than 100 million people of concern of the UN system. So identifying which nationalities and which groups are prioritized is quite a challenge for the UN system. So what they look at durable solutions for refugees. And then in these, the durable solution is firstly, of course, creating conditions so people can go back home. That's their aspiration. Second solution is trying to integrate people locally, because most refugees, when they flee one country, they end up in the country next door. And the third solution is resettlement. And this is for people who have no choices, who have no option in foreseeable future that they will integrate or will be able to go back home.
What are New Zealand's priorities now in terms of what countries we're settling?
Our plan is in the 3-year cycles. In the current year, in this 3-year cycle, the government has decided jointly with UNHCR that 50% of our refugees come from Asian Pacific region. These are people who are refugees in Asian Pacific region, not nationals from Asian Pacific region.
So to be clear, they could be people from, for example, Syria who've come to Indonesia.
That's exactly how we operate. Can be people from Africa who are in Malaysia, and they will count in Asian Pacific region. And then 20% is allocated to Middle Eastern region, predominantly Syrian refugees, but there are also other refugees like Iraqi and Palestinians who are in Syria. And then there's 20% comes from Africa and 10% from Americas. And America specifically, we select from refugees from Colombia and refugees from Venezuela.
In 2022, the government agreed to grant special Ukraine visas to people from Ukraine with family members in New Zealand. As of April this year, 759 special Ukraine visa holders have arrived in New Zealand, and following on from this, a new Ukraine resident visa category opened in March 2024. While war continues to displace thousands across Sudan and Gaza, New Zealand hasn't put any special scheme in place to accept refugees from either place as yet.
We have places allocated to large-scale emergencies, so this year we have places allocated to Syrian refugees, places allocated to Rohingya refugees.
Where does the current situation in Palestine sit in terms of what is the willingness of New Zealand to accept refugees from Palestine?
Yeah, it is very, very sad situation in Palestine, and we know from experience and from talking to UNHCR, so the international community looks into creating conditions so people don't have to flee their homes.
But that's the reality on the ground. They are compelled to at this point.
We know because of based on discussions with our international partners and everybody that it's very, very hard to get people out of Gaza at the moment in a safe manner. So our process is that all refugees that come to New Zealand are mandated by United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, and they make formal submission to us. Only then we can look at that. I don't think at this stage UNHCR has a mandate to do that, because Gaza is not covered by UNHCR, so there is no submissions, no formal submissions by United Nations High Commissioner to us.
Immigration New Zealand says that only Palestinians who are also citizens of a third country and their immediate family members are currently being granted exit permits to leave Gaza. They say that the New Zealand embassy in Cairo continues to petition the Israeli and Egyptian governments for valid New Zealand visa holders to be permitted to leave Gaza. Immigration Minister Erica Stanford also said in a statement to RNZ that immediate family members of Palestinian New Zealanders should apply for a visitor visa, and their applications will be prioritised. Applications can also be made for extended relatives so that their individual circumstances can be considered. Here at the centre, there's a sense of excitement. After about 5 weeks of being there, families are now about to be resettled across 13 regions in New Zealand, from Auckland to Invercargill. The Mulaji family from DRC are about to begin their new life very soon. 15 years ago, they escaped civil war in DRC to go to South Africa. Dudon Mulaji tells me he was a nurse with Médecins Sans Frontières, and his wife Juliet left after rebels killed her first husband in the DRC. The pair met years later in South Africa. Their apartment here is Spartan. There are no signs of their past anywhere to be seen. When I walk in, their 5 kids are sitting on the couch playing video games and eating oranges.
Soon I will be in Invercargill. Children will be at school. I will have a job which I was not working in South Africa. I will work. If I want to study, I'm going to study. I can go forward again with my knowledge of nurse. My children can study peacefully. That thing, I don't know what can I say for it. It is hard for me, really very hard. I just say thank them so much. We're here a long time, almost 2 months. We are here. We have friends from Afghanistan, from Syria.
We talk, though we can't communicate by talking.
But
We can
sometimes
talk by
we can
the sign
by
language.
sign language, and life goes on.
Being accepted as a refugee into New Zealand was a bit of a luck of the draw, Juliet tells me. She still can't quite believe how things turned out for them.
Life also was really difficult there. So I end up to be selling. Him was doing his small stuff, business for us to survive. And myself also, I was busy doing this. I was selling fruits around the corner. It came to happen that they burned my house. My house was burned. I was staying in the flat in South Africa. They burned down the house. I lost everything. Luckily, my kids, they survived. And my dream, I really want my children to achieve their goals.
A key player in the refugee resettlement process in New Zealand is the Red Cross. Akililu Hapte Georges works on community engagement with the Red Cross.
In resettlement, there is no chance to choose where to go under resettlement. It's very hard if you don't have anyone, especially coming to New Zealand, which is, being in a flight for 17, 20 hours, this will be probably the longest flight people they ever had in their life. And they feel like, oh my God, we're going to the end of the earth like now.
Luckily for him, he had his mother and sister here. Akililu arrived in Christchurch as an Eritrean refugee in 2017 on the Refugee Family Reunification Scheme.
The network is really important, and for us as New Zealand Red Cross, especially on the settlement program, we make sure like when former refugees arrive, connect them with their local community if they need, because part of this settlement is connecting people. They don't have a choice to come to New Zealand, but they were told to come. But once they come to New Zealand, many people, they love New Zealand. It's safe. When you compare to the other country, even it's like a little bit better, because in many countries people they struggle, there is racism, there is discrimination and all stuff. But in New Zealand, usually you feel people they're welcomed. That most people they feel like the only thing that they can feel is like isolation, because they feel they live too far from their extended family, and to go back home or any country is like, at least except Australia, it's like a 17 or 18 hours flight. So this is the thing that usually they struggle too far. After the 15th of March, with some of the people who were working say like, wow, we saw it was safe, but it was not. But at the same time, they say when they see people are panic, they say, we've been through a lot. This is nothing to us, so we will cope with that. So usually even on that tragic event, people they still say we are still living. So it's really good to see people, even though still too far, still they accept and they want to live here. Yeah, this is the vibe of New Zealand. You feel people usually look after each other, especially after 15th of March, a lot of changing crisis, especially. So people looking after each other, helping others and supporting, others. It's really important. Yeah.
Next week, I'm looking at what resettlement has been like for Albanian refugees from Kosovo. And it's a story that's actually been quite close to Jamal's heart.
I called myself a forced migrant. I didn't come as a refugee personally, but I am from Kosovo originally, and unfortunately my family, and that's my broader family, ended up as refugees here during the Kosovo War. When I arrived here, it was close to 30 years ago, and then the Kosovo War happened a few years later. And it's then when the family was, at the time, government of the time, allowed for family reunification for our family members. So we had a number of them who came as refugees 25 years ago. And I refer to myself as forced migrant because I had the opportunity to migrate as a skilled migrant. Something terrible was happening. I had small children at the time. I wanted to put them in a safe place, and I think I put them in the safest place that I could have imagined.
Make sure you catch Here Now next time, where I'm off to meet the Albanian Muslim community in Auckland, who are marking 25 years of their arrival in New Zealand after the Kosovo War. You can follow Here Now on all your favourite podcast platforms. That's Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, and everywhere else you get your pod from. You can also find us on the RNZ website. Today's episode was mixed by Ben Pierce, and I'm your producer and host of Here Now, Kadambri Raghukumar.